while my 28-year-old sister Jessica was laughing and recording on her phone as our father screamed, "You're dead to me, you pathetic waste of space," during my public disowning at a family restaurant. I was getting text notifications on my work phone from her boyfriend Hudson, asking for Monday morning approval on a $3 million client contract because he had no idea his girlfriend's loser brother was actually the CEO and co-founder of the tech company where he worked as my direct subordinate. Not a private family argument. My father waited until Jessica's successful manager boyfriend was there to witness him destroying me in front of a crowded restaurant, telling me I was banned from my mother's birthday party because I was the family's shame who would embarrass them in front of Hudson's important career connections. At 31 years old, I'd spent my entire adult life watching my family worship my younger sister while treating me like their biggest failure, never asking what I actually did for work, because they'd decided I was worthless based on my quiet personality and the fact that I worked from home instead of showing off in an office. While I'd been paying their power, water, and internet bills, totaling $9,842 over 2 years. They'd been celebrating Jessica's corporate success and her amazing boyfriend Hudson, who they constantly praised as everything we wish our son could be. Here's what made their restaurant humiliation absolutely insane. While my father was telling me I'd never amount to anything, and my mother was crying about how I'd ruined their family's reputation, and Jessica was live streaming my destruction to her social media followers, Hudson was sitting right there, nodding along with their assessment of his boss's worthlessness. They were celebrating the employee I could fire with one phone call, while destroying the person who controlled his entire career. What these delusional parasites didn't know was that their family's shame had been keeping their electricity on while building a tech empire worth $12 million, and their precious golden child's boyfriend had been begging me for promotions and emails he sent every week. By the time I finished exposing who really controlled their lights, their internet, their precious Jessica's lifestyle, and Hudson's paycheck, they discovered that some family shames turn out to be the puppet masters who've been pulling every string in their pathetic lives. To understand how my family reached the point where they could publicly disown me, while completely depending on my money, you need to know how the golden child system worked in our house for the past 3 decades. From the moment Jessica was born, when I was 3 years old, our parents made it crystal clear that she was their shining star who could do no wrong, while I was the responsible older brother who should feel lucky to bask in her reflected glory. The examples are endless and soul-crushing. When Jessica graduated high school, our parents threw a party for 80 people and hired a photographer. When I graduated summa cum laude from computer science, they took us to Applebee's and spent the whole dinner talking about Jessica's college plans. When she got her first corporate job making $38,000 a year, they acted like she'd been appointed CEO of Google. When I started my tech company, they asked when I was going to get a real job like your sister. Every family gathering became a Jessica Appreciation Festival, where they'd invite people specifically to hear about her latest promotion or achievement, while treating me like the family charity case who needed their patience and understanding. Jessica was their pride, while I was their problem. But while they were celebrating Jessica's mediocre corporate career, I'd been building something they couldn't even comprehend. 3 years ago, I co-founded a cloud computing company with my college roommate, starting from our shared apartment and growing it into a $12 million enterprise with 47 employees across 3 offices. Hudson joined us 18 months ago as a senior manager, impressed by our growth projections and the equity package I personally approved. The irony was perfect. While my family worshipped Jessica's boyfriend for having exactly the kind of corporate success they wished I could achieve, Hudson was actually working for me, sending me weekly progress reports and asking for my approval on every major decision. He'd been promoted twice under my leadership and was making more money than Jessica ever would in her entry-level position. For 2 years, I remained silent about my real life while they treated me like their biggest disappointment. They saw someone who worked from home, didn't talk much about his job, and drove a modest car, so they filled in the blanks with their own assumptions about my failure. Meanwhile, their power stayed on, their internet never got cut off, and their water kept flowing because I'd been quietly covering their utility bills for 24 months. Not because they asked. They had no idea it was me. I just saw the disconnect notices on Mom's kitchen counter one day and started making anonymous payments to keep their household running. Power, water, and internet kept flowing because of me. While they celebrated their golden child's modest success, they were literally depending on their family shame's generosity to keep their lights on. 3 weeks before my mother's 55th birthday, our family started planning what they called the celebration of the year, a dinner party at the fancy Italian restaurant downtown with 30 of their closest friends and colleagues. I first learned about it when Jessica called me unusually excited about showing off her relationship with Hudson to people who mattered in their social circle. "Mom's inviting the Hendersons, the Clarks, and that lawyer family from church," she said, rattling off names like she was reading from a guest list for the Oscars. "Hudson's really excited to meet everyone. He says it'll be great for networking, since some of these people have connections in the tech industry." What struck me wasn't who was invited. It was the careful way Jessica avoided mentioning whether I would be there. Every conversation about the party felt like they were talking around a Ryan-shaped hole in their plans. When I asked Mom directly about the details, she got vague and changed the subject. When I offered to help with arrangements or contribute to the cost, Dad said they had everything handled. The message was clear. Without being stated, they were planning this party like I didn't exist. They wanted to show off their successful daughter and her impressive boyfriend to their social circle, and having their disappointing son there would complicate the narrative they'd been building about their family's achievements. They planned Mom's party like I didn't exist. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my company. Dad called, and I could hear voices in the background, Mom, Jessica, and what sounded like Hudson's voice joining the conversation. They'd clearly planned this as a group intervention. "Ryan, we need to talk about Mom's birthday party," Dad said, his voice carrying that tone he used when he'd already made a decision and was just informing me about it. "We've decided it would be best if you didn't attend this year. You understand. It's important for Jessica's relationship and Hudson's meeting some important people that night." "What do you mean I can't attend?" I asked, though part of me already knew where this was heading. "Look, son," he said, then immediately corrected himself. "Look, Ryan, you're not where you need to be in life right now, and frankly it would be embarrassing to have you there when Hudson's trying to make professional connections. You're the family's shame, and we can't have that affecting Jessica's future." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Dad's voice came back harder than before. "Don't call me your father anymore. You're not invited, and that's final." Dad said, "Don't call me your father," and hung up. After Dad hung up on me, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen for about 10 minutes, letting the reality sink in. My family had officially disowned me because they were embarrassed by what they assumed was my failure, while I'd been quietly supporting them financially for 2 years. The irony was so perfect, it was almost funny. They wanted to hide their family's shame from the employee I'd hired, and could fire at any moment. But what really hit me wasn't the rejection itself. It was the realization that they wanted my money, but not my presence. They were perfectly happy to let me remain their anonymous benefactor, as long as I stayed invisible, when it mattered to their social image. They'd turned me into their secret ATM, useful for keeping the utilities on, but too embarrassing to acknowledge in public. I realized they wanted my money, but not my presence. The decision I made next was probably the most satisfying moment of my adult life. I opened my laptop and started canceling every automatic payment I'd set up for their household bills. Electric company first. I called and removed my credit card from their account, effective immediately. Then water and sewage. Then internet and cable. Each phone call took about 5 minutes, and with every cancellation, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. "Yes, I'd like to remove my payment method from account number," I said to each customer service representative, reading off the account numbers I'd memorized from 2 years of secretly covering their bills. "Effective today, please. Yes, I understand they'll receive notices about setting up new payment arrangements." The process was surgical and methodical. 24 months of automatic payments totaling $9,842.17 came to an end in less than an hour. I printed out all the confirmation emails and put them in a folder labeled "Family Support Terminated" for my records. I canceled every automatic payment with surgical precision. Over the next few days, I watched from a distance as my family's life began to shift in ways they couldn't understand yet. The first sign was Jessica calling me 3 days later, not to apologize, but to complain about her internet being weirdly slow and asking if I knew anything about technical problems in the neighborhood. "It's probably nothing," she said, clearly frustrated. "But Hudson's been trying to work from Mom and Dad's house sometimes, and the connection keeps cutting out. It's embarrassing when he's on important video calls with clients." I almost laughed at the irony. Hudson was trying to impress clients on video calls using internet service that was about to be disconnected because the person paying for it had been kicked out of the family. "Have you checked if the bills are current?" I asked innocently. "What do you mean?" Jessica said. "Mom and Dad handle all that stuff. They're not poor Ryan. They can afford their bills." A week later, the first disconnect notice arrived at their house. Then the second. Then the third. The bills started arriving while they planned their perfect party. 2 weeks after I cut their financial support, my phone started buzzing with increasingly desperate calls and voicemails from my family. The first one came from Mom, her voice shaky and confused. "Ryan, honey, I know your father said some harsh things, but we're having some trouble with the utility companies. They're saying our payments are behind, but that's impossible. Could you maybe help us figure out what's happening?" Dad's voicemail came next. 3 days later, and his tone was completely different from the man who'd disowned me. "Ryan, look, maybe we can work something out about the party. Your mother's really stressed about these bill issues, and we could use your help figuring out what's going wrong with the automatic payments. Call me back." The most pathetic message came from Jessica herself, clearly coached by our parents on what to say. "Hey, big brother. I know we've had some misunderstandings lately, but family is family. Right, and Mom's birthday is coming up, and it would mean so much if you could help solve this utility problem. Maybe we could even find a way for you to come to the party after all." They suddenly remembered they had a son when the lights went out. The manipulation was textbook. Suddenly I was honey and big brother instead of the family shame, and my invitation to the party was back on the table as soon as they needed my money. While my family was panicking about bills they couldn't pay, Hudson was starting to notice that something was seriously wrong with their household situation. According to Jessica's increasingly frustrated phone calls, he'd been asking uncomfortable questions about why the internet kept cutting out during his work-from-home days at their house. "Hudson's starting to think my parents are having financial problems," Jessica complained during one of her calls, begging me to fix their utilities. He offered to help pay for better internet service, but Mom got all weird and defensive about it. Now he's asking if there's some kind of family crisis going on that I haven't told him about. The irony was beautiful. Hudson was offering to pay for services that I'd already been covering for 2 years, while having no idea that his generous gesture was directed toward his own boss's family. He was trying to solve a problem I'd created by being decent to people who'd treated me like garbage. Hudson started asking questions Jessica couldn't answer. As Mom's 55th birthday party approached, my family faced a choice: admit they'd been financially dependent on the son they'd disowned, or figure out how to cover $9,000 in overdue utility bills while hosting a dinner party for 30 people at an expensive restaurant. Their pride was about to cost them everything they'd worked to build socially. Jessica's calls became daily events, each one more desperate than the last. "The restaurant wants the final head count by Wednesday," she said during her latest guilt trip. "Hudson's so excited to meet everyone, and Mom's been planning this for months. Can't you just fix whatever's wrong with the bills and come to the party? We're family. Ryan." They chose their image over their integrity once again. Even faced with financial crisis, they were more concerned about impressing Hudson's professional network than admitting they'd been wrong about their family shame. While my family scrambled to understand their financial crisis, I'd been meticulously documenting every penny I'd spent supporting them over the past 2 years. My bank records told a story they had no idea existed. 24 months of automatic payments totaling $9,842.17 spread across electric, water, internet, and cable bills. The documentation was devastating in its thoroughness. Monthly electric bills averaging $230 each. Water and sewage at $115. Monthly, high-speed internet and premium cable package at $168 per month. Every payment processed automatically from my business account with confirmation emails saved in a folder labeled Family Support. I'd even kept screenshots of the disconnect notices I'd seen on Mom's kitchen counter, the original warnings that had prompted me to start making anonymous payments in the first place. 3 separate utility companies had been within days of cutting off service when I'd quietly stepped in to save them from embarrassment. 2 years of bank records told the real story. The text message trail from my family's recent panic was equally damning evidence of their hypocrisy. I'd saved every message, creating a perfect timeline of how quickly they'd shifted from "don't call me your father" to desperate pleas for help the moment their bills came due. Dad's progression was particularly brutal. "You're dead to us" became "maybe we can work something out" became "your mother's really stressed" became "family is family. Son." Mom went from ignoring my existence to "honey, I know your father said harsh things," to "we could really use your help figuring this out." But Jessica's messages were the most revealing. She'd gone from laughing during my public disowning to "family is family, right?" to "it would mean so much," to offering me back my invitation to the party as payment for fixing their financial problems. Her texts showed exactly what they really thought of me. A walking ATM could activate with fake affection whenever they needed money. Their texts showed exactly what they really thought of me. The breakthrough moment came when Hudson sent me an email at work, having no idea he was writing to his girlfriend's supposedly worthless brother. The subject line was, "Request for meeting client concerns about work-from-home setup," and the content was purely professional until the final paragraph. I've been working remotely from my girlfriend's family home occasionally, but they're experiencing some technical and utility issues that have been affecting my client calls. Would it be possible to expense a mobile hotspot or temporary office space until their household issues are resolved? I don't want to pry into their personal finances, but the situation seems to be causing significant stress for the family. Reading that email was surreal. Hudson was asking his boss, me, for help dealing with problems I'd created by cutting support to his girlfriend's family. He was trying to be respectful and professional about his girlfriend's family's financial crisis, while having no idea that his boss was the family member they'd disowned and the person who'd been paying their bills. The email signature made it even more perfect: Hudson Kane, Senior Manager, Cloud Tech Solutions. Below that was the footer: reporting to Ryan Mitchell, co-founder and CEO. Hudson's email to his boss revealed everything. But the most valuable witness to my family's dysfunction turned out to be my Aunt Lauren, Dad's sister, who'd been watching their treatment of me for years. When she heard about the party situation, she called me directly. "Your father's lost his damn mind," she said bluntly. "I've watched him and your mother favor Jessica for 30 years, but this is beyond the pale. Disowning you for being embarrassing. You're the most successful person in this entire family, and they're too blind to see it." Lauren had been at family gatherings where they'd dismissed my achievements, rolled their eyes at my career, and made jokes about me, playing on computers while celebrating Jessica's mediocre corporate job. She'd watched them treat me like their charity case while I was building a multi-million-dollar company. "I know about the bills, Ryan," she said quietly. "I saw the disconnect notices at your mother's house last Christmas, and then mysteriously everything got resolved. I figured it was you helping them out, but I never imagined they'd treat you this badly while you were supporting them." Aunt Lauren knew exactly who the real family shame was. She'd witnessed years of favoritism, documented my parents' hypocrisy, and was ready to testify to anyone who'd listen about which child had actually been carrying this family's weight all along. With all the evidence documented, and my family's desperation reaching peak levels, I had to decide whether to attend Mom's birthday party and reveal the truth about who I really was. Part of me wanted to just let them figure out their financial mess on their own, while I enjoyed my peace and quiet. But another part of me, the part that had endured 30 years of being treated like their biggest disappointment, wanted them to see exactly what they'd thrown away when they chose their image over their integrity. The decision wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. They'd spent decades celebrating mediocrity while dismissing actual success, and I was tired of letting them live in their delusion. If they wanted to hide their family shame from Hudson's professional network, they deserved to discover that their shame was actually the most successful person in the room. I decided they deserved to know who they'd really rejected. Meanwhile, Hudson was facing the most difficult professional situation of his career, though he had no idea yet how personal it would become. His email requesting help with work-from-home issues had opened a door that would force him to choose between his relationship with Jessica and his professional integrity. I could have simply approved his request for a mobile hotspot and left it at that. But watching him struggle with technical problems caused by my family's financial crisis, while they continued to disrespect me, felt wrong. Hudson was a good employee who deserved to know the truth about the people he was trying to help, and Jessica deserved to face the consequences of celebrating my humiliation while dating my subordinate. The ethical dilemma was clear. Should I tell Hudson who I really was before the party, giving him a chance to make an informed decision about his relationship? Or should I let the truth come out naturally and watch Jessica's world crumble in real time? Hudson faced the hardest choice of his career. I spent the weekend organizing my evidence and planning exactly how to handle the inevitable confrontation. The bank records went into a neat folder with each utility payment highlighted and totaled. The screenshots of their desperate text messages got printed and organized chronologically. Hudson's email about their household issues went on top of the stack, along with his professional request for help dealing with problems I'd caused by cutting their support. But the most important preparation was mental. I'd spent years absorbing their disappointment and criticism, letting them make me feel like I wasn't good enough for their family. This already would be the first time I'd face them as the person I actually was, not their failed son, but their successful benefactor, who'd finally decided to stop enabling their delusions. I practiced what I'd say, how I'd present the evidence, and how I'd handle their inevitable attempts to minimize the situation or turn it back on me. They'd had 30 years to underestimate me, gaslight me, and dismiss my worth. I gathered everything they needed to see who I really was. The Italian restaurant was exactly as fancy as Jessica had described. White tablecloths, dim lighting, and the kind of atmosphere that screamed, "Look how successful we are," to anyone within earshot. I arrived 30 minutes after the party had started, walking through the dining room in my best suit, while my family sat at a long table near the back, completely unaware that their family shame had decided to join the celebration. The look on Dad's face when he saw me was priceless. He went pale, then red, then started to stand up like he was going to physically remove me from the restaurant. Mom grabbed his arm and whispered something urgent in his ear, while Jessica's mouth fell open in shock. But the most interesting reaction came from Hudson, who looked confused rather than angry, like he was trying to figure out why everyone was acting like I'd just crashed a funeral. "Ryan," Mom said, her voice shaky with panic, "what are you doing here? We talked about this." And the other guests at the table, the Hendersons, the Clarks, and several other family friends, turned to watch our family drama unfold in real time. "I decided Mom's 55th birthday was too important to miss," I said calmly, pulling up an empty chair from a nearby table. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." Their family's shame had come to Mom's birthday party. The tension was immediate and obvious to everyone at the table. Dad looked like he wanted to explode, but couldn't figure out how to publicly disown me again without looking insane in front of their guests. Jessica kept shooting glances at Hudson, clearly mortified that her loser brother was about to embarrass her in front of the man she'd been bragging about for months. But Hudson's reaction was what made the whole evening perfect. Instead of looking embarrassed or confused by my presence, he stood up and extended his hand with genuine professional respect. "Ryan, I had no idea you'd be here tonight," he said, with a smile that made Jessica's face go white. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my boss, Ryan Mitchell. He's the co-founder and CEO of Cloud Tech Solutions, the company where I work. I've been telling Jessica's family all about how innovative our leadership team is." The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a fork drop on the carpet 3 tables away. Hudson had just introduced me as his boss to a room full of people who'd been told I was the family's biggest disappointment. The professional respect in his voice made it clear this wasn't a joke or a case of mistaken identity. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Mom looked around the table to see if anyone else was as confused as she was. The Hendersons and Clarks stared at me with new interest, suddenly realizing they were meeting the CEO of a company they'd probably heard about in business circles. Hudson introduced me as his boss to the whole party. "I'm sorry," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you just say Ryan is your boss?" She was looking back and forth between Hudson and me like we were speaking a foreign language. "That's right," Hudson said proudly. "Ryan hired me personally 18 months ago. Best career move I ever made. The company's grown incredibly under his leadership. We just closed a $3 million client contract last week that I'll be managing under Ryan's supervision." The revelation hit the table like a bomb going off in slow motion. Every assumption they'd made about my life, every joke they'd told about my failure, every moment of shame they'd felt about having me as their son and brother. All of it crumbled in the space of 30 seconds. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward the table so everyone could see the transaction history. "While we're sharing professional updates," I said calmly, "I thought you might be interested to know that I've been covering your power, water, and internet bills for the past 24 months. The total comes to $9,842.17. I canceled all the automatic payments 2 weeks ago, which explains why you've been getting those disconnect notices." I showed them the numbers on my phone screen. Every monthly payment highlighted and categorized, every confirmation email saved and organized. The evidence was irrefutable and devastating. I figured since I wasn't worthy of being called your son anymore, I probably shouldn't keep acting like one by paying your household expenses. Power, water, and internet stopped being my problem. The restaurant had gone completely quiet around our table. Other diners were openly staring at the family drama unfolding in real time. Mom started crying silently, while Dad sat frozen in his chair. Jessica looked like she was about to be sick, finally understanding that she'd been celebrating her boyfriend's success while humiliating her boyfriend's boss. But the most satisfying moment came when Aunt Lauren, who'd been sitting quietly at the far end of the table, started clapping slowly. "Well done, Ryan," she said loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "It's about time this family learned who their real success story is. I've been watching them treat you like garbage for years, while you've been supporting them financially and building an empire they couldn't even comprehend." Everyone saw who the real family shame was. The aftermath of Mom's birthday party was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, my family's social circle knew exactly what had happened at the restaurant, how they'd disowned their most successful child while he was secretly paying their bills, and how they'd celebrated his employee while calling him their family shame. The story spread through their church, their neighborhood, and their professional networks like wildfire. Dad tried calling me 3 times the next week, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails that swung between half-hearted apologies and demands that I fix this situation before it destroyed their reputation completely. Mom sent a long text about how families make mistakes and how we needed to move forward together now that misunderstandings had been cleared up. But the most pathetic response came from Jessica, who showed up at my office building unannounced, crying about how Hudson was acting weird around her family, and how she was afraid he was going to break up with her because of the awkward dinner situation. She actually used those words, awkward dinner situation, to describe publicly humiliating the person who'd been supporting her family financially. The utilities got shut off 2 weeks later, exactly as I'd planned. Their house went dark on a Tuesday evening, while they scrambled to figure out how to pay overdue bills totaling nearly $10,000. They learned what life cost without their family shame. As for me, walking away from that restaurant table had been the most liberating moment of my adult life. For 30 years, I'd absorbed their disappointment, their dismissal, and their casual cruelty, while secretly hoping they'd eventually recognize my worth. But seeing their faces when Hudson introduced me as his boss, watching them realize they'd been wrong about everything, finally gave me the closure I'd been seeking for decades. I changed my phone number the following Monday and blocked them on all social media. No more anonymous bill payments, no more secret financial support, no more pretending their approval mattered to my success. I'd spent 3 decades remaining silent about who I really was, letting them define me by their limitations and assumptions. But now everyone knew the truth, including me. Their family shame had turned out to be their only success story, and they'd thrown me away because they were too blind to see it. I finally stopped being silent about who I really was.